I was never supposed to be here, at least not like this. I had imagined a different kind of moment when I made my breakthrough, one filled with celebration, not the cold rush of anger and confusion that gripped me now. My name is Leora Briggs, and I am an inventor, not the dreamer kind. No, I made things happen. I created things that people thought were impossible. I had always wanted to change the world, and I was on the verge of doing just that. My invention, the AI that could predict complex human behavior, analyzing emotions, processing vast amounts of data to suggest actions, was revolutionary. It could change everything. Businesses, governments, healthcare, hell, it could even predict the stock market. I was going to be the one to make it happen. But that was before the betrayal. It was a Thursday afternoon when I realized the depths of it. My mentor, Paul Weston, a giant in Silicon Valley, called me into his office. He'd been like a father to me, always supportive, always there when I needed guidance. I trusted him more than anyone. When I showed him my prototype, he'd promised me that we'd change the world together. And for months we worked side by side. He was my biggest advocate, telling everyone how brilliant my work was. But now I'm sitting here in his office, staring at the screen in front of me, my world crumbling. I had just received an email that I wasn't supposed to see. It was from one of the senior engineers at his company. The subject line read, "New AI launch." Inside was a press release that made my stomach drop. The product they were about to announce was my AI. The AI I had been working on for over a year. I blinked. Once. Twice. The words on the screen swam in front of my eyes. I was still trying to process it when Paul walked into the room. He smiled the same reassuring smile he had always worn. "Leora." I've been thinking. He started his tone casual, like he was telling me about a new tech feature or a new market strategy. "Your work is groundbreaking. I think it's time the world sees it. I want to help you, but I think we need to take a different approach." I didn't understand. What was he saying? Take a different approach. What do you mean? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I was trying to keep calm, trying not to let him see how the pit in my stomach was growing deeper with every passing second. "I've spoken with the board," Paul continued, sitting down in front of me. "They think your AI is ready for a bigger stage. We're going to launch it under our company name, Leora. We'll have more resources, a bigger reach. You'll get recognition, of course." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" "Under your company name," I whispered, a lump forming in my throat. Paul's face softened like he was trying to comfort me. "We'll put you in the spotlight, Leora. But there are things you don't understand about the business world. I've been doing this for years. This is how it works." My heart was pounding now. "No," I said, the word coming out with more force than I intended. "No, that's not how this works. This is my work, my idea, my AI." I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. "You can't just take it." Paul's expression shifted. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold now. "I've been patient with you, Leora. But this is business. You're too idealistic. You don't have what it takes to make this go public. You need me. And this is how it's going to happen. Deal with it." I couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit me like a slap in the face, sharper than any wound I had ever felt. I thought Paul was my ally, my partner, but now he was the one who had taken everything from me. He stole my idea, my vision, and claimed it as his own. I left his office in a daze. My legs felt like they couldn't hold me. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but I couldn't even focus enough to dial the number I needed. All I could think about was one thing: revenge. I had to take it back. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He had betrayed me, and I wasn't going to just let that slide. I would expose him for who he really was, even if it meant tearing everything down in the process. It took me 2 days to even begin to process everything that had happened. 2 days of pacing my apartment, staring at the walls, and feeling the raw anger bubbling up in my chest. But that anger wasn't going to do me any good unless I channeled it, focused it, and used it to get back what was mine. I sat at my desk, the same desk where I had spent countless hours working on my AI. It felt like a lifetime ago now. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I stared at the lines of code I had written. This AI was my child, my creation, my soul poured into every line, every algorithm. And Paul had taken it, stolen it, and used it for his own gain. I couldn't let that happen. I knew I had to act fast. The world was about to see his version of my AI, and once that happened, it would be too late. The tech community would fall for it. They would praise him, elevate him, and I would just be another forgotten inventor. But that wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. I leaned forward, cracking my knuckles, and then my fingers danced across the keyboard. I wasn't just going to expose Paul. I was going to destroy everything he had built on the back of my work. His company gone, his reputation shattered, and my AI. It would be known for what it really was, the invention of Leora Briggs, not Paul Weston. I took a deep breath and accessed my own AI system. I had designed it with multiple layers of protection. After all, who knew if someone would try to steal it? But I had thought ahead. I had coded a backdoor into the system, a way to remotely control it without leaving a trace. It was a safety net I'd never thought I'd need. But here we were. I set to work. My first target was the upcoming product launch. I had to get inside Paul's company's network and tamper with the AI they were planning to roll out. I couldn't just expose him directly yet. No, I had to wait for the perfect moment. And that moment was the launch. If I could sabotage it, ruin the product, then people would start questioning his so-called brilliance. The plan was simple. I had access to the company's internal network through the back door, and I had already mapped out the launch schedule. The press release was set, the live stream was ready to go. But what they didn't know was that I had planted a bug in the system, something that would cause the AI to malfunction live during the launch. All I had to do was press a button and the system would crash, showing the world that Paul's AI was nothing more than a cheap imitation of mine. As I worked through the process, I felt a sick sense of satisfaction. This was it. The moment where everything changed. I was no longer the victim. I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one in control now. I was the one who held the power. But I couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. Was this really the right thing to do? Was I going too far? I had always believed in fairness and justice. And yet here I was, plotting the downfall of a man who had once been a mentor to me. No, he didn't deserve my sympathy. He didn't deserve anything from me, not after what he did. The clock on my desk ticked louder in the silence, and I snapped out of my thoughts. Time was running out. I had set everything in motion. The bug was ready. The press release was scheduled to go out in just a few hours. I just had to hit enter. My finger hovered above the key. And for a brief moment, I wondered if I could stop. Was this really the right thing to do? But I couldn't back down now. Not after everything he had taken from me. I pressed enter. The system froze for a split second, and then a message popped up on my screen. System error. AI cannot function. Please restart. It was done. I sat back, the weight of the moment sinking in. I had just taken down Paul's entire project. I had just made sure that the world knew the truth. And I felt nothing. Not relief. Not triumph. Just a cold emptiness. I had done what needed to be done. But now I was on the clock. Paul was going to find out soon. And when he did, he wouldn't be happy. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of anticipation and unease. I barely slept, hardly ate, and when I did sleep, it was filled with nightmares of Paul Weston coming for me, his face twisted with rage. I had done it. I had taken down his prized AI, exposed his theft to the world. But now the real consequences were just beginning. I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as the hours ticked by. I had set everything in motion. There was no turning back now. My phone buzzed relentlessly, but I didn't dare answer. The media was picking up on the glitch in Paul's AI, and rumors were already swirling. Paul had been quiet, too quiet, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The storm was coming, and I was the one who had thrown the first stone. The first signs of trouble came the next day. I was sitting at my desk reviewing some old code for another project when my phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat and I felt the sweat start to form on my palms. I hesitated but then answered. "Leora," a cold voice said on the other end. It was Paul. "You're playing a dangerous game." I felt my stomach drop. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was restraining something much darker beneath the surface. I tried to stay composed, but the words came out in a rush, almost a challenge. "I'm not the one who started this, Paul." I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "You stole from me, and now the world knows." There was a long pause. Then he spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "You think this is over? You think I won't make you regret this?" I could feel the threat in his words, but it only fueled the fire inside me. I had made my choice. There was no going back. "I'm not afraid of you, Paul," I replied. "You should be afraid of me." With that, the line went dead. I sat there for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. My hands shook as I placed the phone down, but I wasn't scared, not anymore. I had already made my decision and there was no turning back. But even with my resolve, I knew the storm was far from over. Later that evening, I received an unexpected visitor. A knock at the door startled me and I froze for a moment. I wasn't expecting anyone. I got up slowly and peeked through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who was standing outside. It was Maya, one of the senior engineers at Paul's company. I had worked with her on a few minor projects in the past, but I hadn't spoken to her in months. I opened the door cautiously, trying to mask the tension in my voice. "Maya," I asked, trying to keep my surprise hidden. She stepped inside without saying much, her eyes darting around the room as if she was nervous. She was clearly distressed, and I could see it in the way she was fidgeting. I motioned for her to sit and she did, but she looked like she was about to say something but struggling to get the words out. "Leora." "I don't know how to say this," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think you would go this far. I didn't think Paul would." She stopped herself, looking down at her hands. I leaned forward, my curiosity piqued. "What are you talking about, Maya?" Her eyes met mine, filled with guilt. "I didn't know about the back door. I didn't know what he was planning to do with your AI," she whispered. "But now, everything is falling apart. The system's malfunctioning and people are starting to question Paul. He's blaming you for everything, saying you sabotaged him. He's furious, Leora, and he's coming for you." I felt a wave of relief mixed with fear. She was on my side, but I knew things were escalating. Paul wasn't just angry anymore. He was desperate. And desperate men did desperate things. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do I do, Maya?" Her gaze softened, and she sighed. "You have to be careful, Leora. He's not going to stop. You've seen how far he's willing to go. But there's one thing you can do. One thing that might help you." "What's that?" I asked urgently. Maya hesitated, then spoke quietly. "You need to get ahead of the story. Expose everything, not just the AI. Everything he's been doing. The corruption, the lies, the way he's been using people. Especially you. If you can get the media on your side, if you can make the public see him for what he is, it'll be over for him." I stared at her for a long moment, weighing her words. I knew Maya was right. It wasn't enough to just sabotage his product and walk away. I had to go deeper. I had to expose Paul for everything he was. But that meant going even further into dangerous territory. I nodded slowly, my resolve hardening. "All right, Maya. I'll do it. But you have to help me. I can't do this alone." Her face brightened with a small, relieved smile. "You're not alone, Leora. I'll help you. We'll take him down together." As she left, I couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose. The storm was coming, and it was time for me to face it head-on. I was no longer just defending myself. I was preparing to destroy everything Paul had built, and I wasn't going to stop until I had taken back what was mine. But there was one thing I hadn't counted on: the depths of Paul's rage. And I was about to learn just how far he was willing to go. It's funny how quickly everything can spiral out of control. The feeling of victory I had when I exposed Paul's AI glitch seemed so fleeting now. He was no longer just a thief. He was a threat. And I was starting to realize how far he was willing to go to destroy me. In the days following Maya's visit, things got even more chaotic. I spent every waking hour researching, plotting, and preparing for the next phase of my plan. I knew I couldn't just sit back anymore. Paul was using everything at his disposal to cover his tracks, and I had to be one step ahead at all times. I kept my distance from the media for a while. As tempting as it was to go public with the truth, I knew it wasn't the right time yet. Paul was already spinning the narrative that I was the saboteur, that I was some disgruntled employee trying to ruin his empire. The lies were piling up faster than I could expose them, but I wasn't going to let him win. I had an ace up my sleeve. Maya had given me a crucial piece of information, something that could tear Paul's carefully built reputation to shreds. She had told me about the hidden files, the ones Paul had kept from everyone else, including the board. Files that documented his shady business deals, his manipulation of investors, and the illegal dealings he had been involved in for years. I spent days preparing, going through old emails, coding scripts, and setting up an anonymous platform to release the information. This was it, the final step in my plan. Exposing him completely. Not just for stealing my AI, but for all the dark secrets he had been hiding for so long. The night before I was set to release everything, my nerves were at their peak. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what could go wrong. What if Paul figured out my plan? What if he came after me directly? I had no guarantees, no safety net. But there was one thing I knew for sure: I couldn't stop now. I stood up from my desk, my palms sweaty, as I stared at the final document I had just finished. The emails, the contracts, the financial documents, all laid bare for the world to see. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. The kind of justice that Paul thought he could avoid by stealing from me and using his power to cover his tracks. With a deep breath, I clicked the send button. The files went live. And for the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm. I had done it. I had exposed him for who he really was. Now there was no way he could deny it. No way he could escape the truth. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, watching as the first article appeared, picking up the information and spreading it like wildfire. The news outlets started to pick up on the story, and soon Paul was everywhere, on every major news channel, in every headline, being torn apart for his corruption and deceit. But even as I watched his empire crumble, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Paul wasn't going to just give up quietly, and I knew that he would come for me with everything he had. I had exposed his darkest secrets, and now there was no telling what lengths he would go to in order to get revenge. I was right. The very next day, I received a visit from the police. My heart dropped as they walked into my apartment, their badges visible. They weren't here to congratulate me for my whistleblowing. They were here because Paul had filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, fraud, and sabotage. He was claiming that I had fabricated all the evidence, that I was the one who had stolen from him, and that I had intentionally ruined his company. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had exposed him. I had revealed the truth. And now he was trying to turn it all on me. I felt the rage boil over again, but this time it was different. I wasn't just fighting for my AI anymore. I was fighting for my freedom, for my reputation, for my future. The police told me to come with them to the station for questioning. They handed me a summons and told me I had to appear in court. As they left, I felt the weight of the situation settle in. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was a full-blown war. But I wasn't about to back down. I had taken down Paul once, and I would do it again. This time, I wouldn't just destroy his reputation. I would make sure he would never be able to hurt anyone again. The next few weeks felt like a blur of chaos, tension, and fear. The lawsuit Paul filed against me wasn't just a legal battle, it was a full-scale war. Every day I was fighting for my future, for my career, for my life. And with every step forward, it felt like Paul was right behind me, pushing harder, trying to drag me down. The media coverage of the scandal only intensified. My name was everywhere, but it wasn't the recognition I had wanted. Headlines screamed accusations, painting me as the villain, the disgruntled former employee who had sabotaged the successful entrepreneur Paul Weston. They didn't care about the truth, they cared about the story. And the story was that Paul was the hero, and I was the villain. I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't let him win. Not when I was so close. The court date was looming. I could feel the weight of it, the pressure of everything that had led up to this moment. I had already prepared all the evidence, everything that would expose Paul for what he really was: a liar, a manipulator, and a thief. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Paul had the power, the connections, and a team of lawyers who would stop at nothing to discredit me. But I had one thing they didn't: the truth. I sat in my apartment the night before the trial, reviewing the case one last time. The hours dragged on and my mind kept racing. I could hear the clock ticking louder with every passing minute. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was about to be decided in that courtroom. And then I received a message from Maya. She had been in contact with someone on the inside, a whistleblower from Paul's company who had leaked some of his most incriminating documents. They were going to release everything tomorrow, right before the trial started. I felt my heart skip a beat. This was it. The final blow. Maya's message was clear: we're going to finish this. Paul won't be able to walk away from this. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I had done everything I could to fight back, but this was the final piece. This would be the moment that would bring Paul to his knees. The truth would finally come out. The next morning, as I walked into the courtroom, I felt a surge of determination. Paul was already sitting at the defense table, his usual calm demeanor masking the desperation that I could see behind his eyes. He knew what was coming, but he had no idea how deep the hole was that he had dug for himself. The trial began, and I watched as Paul's lawyers spun their web of lies, trying to paint me as a criminal. But every lie they told only made me more determined. I knew the truth would come out. It had to. And then, right as the defense team was wrapping up their closing statements, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. The door to the courtroom opened and a man stepped inside. He was holding a file thick with papers. He walked up to the judge and handed him the file. The courtroom fell silent as the judge opened it and began to read. The documents were explosive. They contained evidence of Paul's illegal dealings, his manipulation of investors, and most damning of all, his direct involvement in the theft of my AI. The whistleblower had come through. Maya had kept her word. Paul's face turned pale as the judge read the documents aloud. His eyes darted nervously around the courtroom. The smugness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by panic. But it wasn't enough to just have the documents. I stood up, my voice clear and strong as I addressed the judge in the courtroom. "Your Honor," I said, my heart pounding, "these documents are only a part of the story. Paul Weston didn't just steal my work. He has been using his position, his power, to manipulate everyone around him. He's been stealing from investors, lying to clients, and covering up his illegal activities for years. He thought he could silence me, that he could use me and discard me. But I'm not the villain here. He is." The room was still. Every eye was on me. Paul's eyes locked with mine, and for the first time I saw fear. The judge looked at the documents, then at Paul. "Mr. Weston, do you have anything to say?" Paul opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He was trapped. There was no way out. The judge turned to me. "Miss Briggs, I think it's clear that justice is on your side." In that moment, it was over. Paul Weston's empire crumbled. His reputation, his wealth, and his career, all of it came crashing down. He was arrested that day, and within weeks the media was no longer praising him. They were exposing him for the fraud he was. As for me, I had won. I had taken back what was mine, not just my invention, but my dignity and my future. I had done what I set out to do. I had made sure Paul Weston would never hurt anyone again. The victory didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined, though. There was no moment of triumph, no celebration. It was just relief. I had fought for what was right, and that was enough. In the end, I realized that revenge wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about standing up for yourself, fighting for what you believe in, and never backing down. And with that, I knew my journey wasn't over. I would keep inventing. I would keep creating. Because in this world, the only thing that truly belongs to you is your work, your ideas, and your strength to carry on. The days after the trial were a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. Paul's fall from grace had been swift and dramatic. His company had been dismantled, his assets frozen, and his name dragged through the mud. The media had completely turned on him, as they always do with fallen giants. But for me, the victory felt hollow. I had won, yes, but I hadn't anticipated the quiet emptiness that followed. There was no joy in his downfall, no satisfaction in seeing him taken down. What did I really gain from this? I had gotten my AI back, but what did that really mean? The world was moving forward, and I was left behind watching the pieces of my life shift in a way I hadn't prepared for. I spent weeks in solitude trying to make sense of everything. The media storm had died down, and the echoes of the courtroom drama slowly faded into the background of my mind. I had been so focused on revenge, on making sure Paul paid for what he did, that I hadn't considered what would happen after. I hadn't planned for what life would look like when the battle was over. But it was time to move forward. I had to. I began working on my AI again, but this time something was different. The passion I once had for it, its potential to change the world, felt distant. I didn't know if I had the energy to keep pushing forward, to build something new, to put myself out there again. But I also knew that I couldn't let this experience define me. I couldn't let Paul's betrayal be the end of my story. And so I decided to take a break. Not from my work, but from the relentless drive that had consumed me for so long. I started going outside, more, reconnecting with the world I had abandoned while I focused on my invention. I met new people, did new things. I even took a trip to a small town in the mountains just to clear my head. It was there in the quiet of nature that I realized something important. I had spent so long trying to destroy Paul, trying to make him pay for what he did, that I had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. To create for the joy of creation. To invent not out of anger or vengeance, but because I truly wanted to make the world a better place. I came back from that trip with a new perspective. I wasn't going to let my past define me. I wasn't going to let Paul's betrayal steal my passion for innovation. I would take the lessons I had learned about resilience, about the power of truth, about standing up for myself, and use them to create something bigger than anything I had ever done before. The next few months were a blur of inspiration and hard work. I threw myself into my projects with renewed vigor, not because I wanted to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to create something that was mine, that was purely my own. And I did. I started a new company, one built on the values that had guided me through the hardest parts of this journey: integrity, honesty, and the belief that technology could be used for good. I surrounded myself with people who shared my vision, and together we began developing the next big thing in AI, a system that could help people, not just profit off them. It wasn't easy. The road was filled with obstacles, and there were times when I doubted myself. But every time I stumbled, I remembered the lessons I had learned from my battle with Paul. And that kept me going. The company grew slowly, but steadily. And with every new breakthrough, every step forward, I realized that I was finally creating something that truly mattered. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the betterment of the world. And as I stood on the stage at our first major conference presenting our new AI to the world, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I had done it. I had rebuilt my life, my career, and my passion. Looking back, I realized that the revenge I sought had been more than just a way to get back at Paul. It had been a catalyst, a turning point. It had forced me to confront my own limitations, my own fears, and ultimately my own potential. I was no longer the woman who had been broken by betrayal. I was a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up. And that in the end was the most powerful revenge of all. The months that followed were nothing short of transformative. I had started a new chapter in my life, and it was one I was writing on my own terms. The company was growing, and with every new success, I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't known in years. It wasn't about the money, the accolades, or the recognition. It was about the journey. The lessons I had learned. The woman I had become. I had left the past behind me. But there was still one thing I couldn't shake, one thing that haunted me every day. Paul. I had heard whispers about him from time to time, about his struggles since the trial. His company was dead, his reputation tarnished beyond repair, but he was still out there trying to pick up the pieces of his life. Some said he was working on a new project, a new company. Others said he had completely given up, retreating into the shadows. I didn't care. I didn't want to care. But every so often I'd find myself wondering if he was truly done. If I had truly beaten him. Or if there was still a chance he would come back for me. I was sitting at my desk late one evening reviewing a contract for a new partnership when my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. I have news about Paul. He's making moves. I don't think it's over yet. My stomach sank. Maya's words sent a wave of cold through me. I'd never fully let go of the fear that Paul would somehow find a way to rise again. To exact revenge of his own. I spent the next few days digging, trying to uncover anything that might give me peace of mind. Anything that would confirm my suspicions that Paul was indeed laying low, too broken to come after me. But instead, I uncovered something worse. There it was, an article in a small independent tech publication. The headline read, "Paul Weston's comeback, new AI startup on the horizon." My hands went numb. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The article was vague, cryptic even, but it was clear Paul wasn't done. He was coming back with a vengeance. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let him ruin everything I had built. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. But more than that, I wasn't the same person I had been when I first confronted him. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of what he might do. I had already won the battle against him once, and I would do it again if it came to that. But this time, it would be on my terms. I contacted Maya and told her what I had found. She was as shocked as I was, but she didn't hesitate. "We'll deal with this, Leora. Together." That night, as I sat in my office watching the city lights below, I realized something. I had already destroyed the man who had tried to break me. I had already shown the world who he really was. But what I hadn't done was build the legacy I wanted. I had rebuilt my career, yes, but I hadn't built anything that would last. Not a foundation that would outlast me. Not something that would continue even after I was gone. It was time to shift my focus to think about the future, not just the present. I knew what I had to do. The next few months were spent working on something entirely new. I poured myself into it with everything I had, and as the idea began to take shape, I realized it was everything I had been missing. It was bigger than AI. It was bigger than any project I had ever done before. I created a platform for young, aspiring tech innovators, people who, like me, had big ideas but needed the support to bring them to life. It wasn't just a company. It was a movement. A movement to help those who had been overlooked, those who had been pushed down by the system. A movement to give them a chance to shine. It was my way of leaving a mark on the world. My way of showing the next generation that you don't have to play by the old rules to succeed. You just have to play the game smarter, with more heart and more integrity. As the platform grew, I saw it change lives. Young people from all over the world were building companies, creating products, and pushing boundaries. They were succeeding not because of their connections or their wealth, but because they believed in themselves, and they believed in the power of innovation. And as I watched them grow, I realized that this was my legacy. This was what I was meant to do. Not just build a business, but build something that would outlast me. Something that would keep giving long after I was gone. And in that moment, I knew that Paul Weston, despite all the damage he had caused, had given me exactly what I needed to move forward. He had pushed me to my limits, made me fight for my future. But in the end, it wasn't revenge that mattered. It was the legacy I was leaving behind. I wasn't defined by what happened to me. I wasn't defined by the betrayal or the struggle. I was defined by the choices I made and the impact I had on the world. That was my true revenge, and it was the only thing that mattered. Time has a way of healing wounds, but it doesn't erase the scars. They're permanent reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. It's been over a year since the trial, since the moment I brought Paul Weston to his knees and watched him crumble. And while the world has moved on, I haven't. Not completely. I've kept my focus on my company and the legacy I'm building, but every once in a while, a shadow from the past creeps up on me. It's not Paul's face I see in those moments, but the emptiness of what I lost in the fight. The parts of myself I left behind in the pursuit of revenge. The AI project, the one I had poured my heart and soul into, has taken on a life of its own. It's grown far beyond anything I could have imagined. We're now partnering with governments and health organizations, using it to predict public health crises and even assist in climate change efforts. It's the kind of impact I've always dreamed of, making the world better, one algorithm at a time. But as my company flourishes, something else grows within me too, a gnawing feeling of unfinished business. It's not with Paul. It's with myself. There's a voice in my head that won't stop whispering. What now? It asks. What's next for you, Leora? At first, I ignored it. I told myself that I was doing good work. I had taken my shot at Paul and I had won. I had built something real, something lasting. But as I sit in my office late one night watching the city lights twinkle below me, I realize that my victory feels incomplete. I've been running from something, running from the fact that I've been too focused on success to think about what truly matters. I've spent so much time proving myself, showing the world that I'm not the victim, that I can stand on my own, that I've forgotten the simple joys of living. I'm a workaholic. I know that. I've dedicated myself to my company, to innovation, and to making sure I'm never powerless again. But in doing so, I've lost touch with the parts of me that used to find peace in quiet moments. The parts of me that used to find joy in simple things before Paul ever came into my life. I'm staring at my computer screen, ready to dive into another long night of work when my phone buzzes. It's a message from Maya. Leora, I know you've been busy, but I think it's time. It's time to face what's really holding you back. We need to talk. My heart skips a beat. Maya has always been there for me, but I know her well enough to know that when she says something like this, it's not a casual conversation. She's seen something in me that I haven't been willing to face. And deep down, I know she's right. I step away from my desk and I take a breath. I don't know what she's going to say, but I know this. I can't run from this anymore. I can't keep pretending that I'm completely okay, that everything I've worked for has filled the hole inside of me. Later that evening, I meet Maya at a cafe. The atmosphere is warm and familiar, but my nerves are anything but calm. I sit across from her and she's looking at me with that knowing expression, like she's been waiting for me to come to this conclusion for a long time. She starts the conversation with something simple, but it hits me like a wave. You've been running, Leora. You've been running from the past, from your pain, from yourself. And I get it, I do. But it's time to stop. You've built something incredible, but you've been avoiding the part of you that's still hurting. And it's holding you back. I don't know how to respond. I've spent so long burying the pain of the past that I never stopped to acknowledge it. I've always told myself that I couldn't afford to feel anything but success, but now here I am realizing how hollow that is. Maya continues. You've conquered the world outside, but it's time to conquer what's inside. The rest will come when you're whole, and you'll finally be free. I feel a lump form in my throat. It's not just the past that I've been avoiding. It's the fear of letting myself truly heal. The fear of facing the parts of me that have been broken for so long. But Maya is right. It's time. The next few months are a process of rebuilding not just my company, but myself. I take time for the things I neglected: my health, my relationships, the things that brought me peace before everything went off course. I find a new rhythm, one that allows me to live fully, to experience life with the same intensity I put into my work. I visit old friends. I laugh more. I travel to new places, not for business, but for pleasure. I start running again, something I haven't done in years. I take long walks in the city without my phone, without the constant buzz of emails and messages. I start cooking for myself, rediscovering the simple joy of creating something just for the sake of creating it. And for the first time in a long time, I feel complete. Not because I've finally won, but because I've learned to stop running. I've learned to embrace both the successes and the failures, the victories and the losses. In that sense, I realized the ultimate revenge wasn't in taking Paul down. It was in finding peace within myself, in rebuilding the pieces of my life that I had discarded in pursuit of something that wasn't truly mine to begin with. The AI project, my company, everything I had worked for, it's all part of the legacy I'm building. But now I'm building a life as well. A life that isn't just about what I can achieve, but about who I am and how I live. The woman who once sought revenge is no longer defined by the pain of the past. I am defined by the woman I have become, and the woman I continue to become. I've learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true power lies not in destruction, but in creation. And in that creation, I've found my peace. Just when I thought I was done with it all, the past had a way of resurfacing. Not in the form of memories or nightmares, but something much more dangerous, an opportunity for Paul to make his return. And this time, he wasn't coming back as a defeated man. He was coming back with a purpose. The weeks after the launch of my new platform passed in a blur. My team and I were overwhelmed by the response, and for a brief moment, I felt a peace that had eluded me for years. The work was fulfilling in a way I hadn't expected. I was changing lives, helping others achieve their dreams, and in the process, my own dreams were taking shape. But in the back of my mind, I could never fully shake the feeling that something was looming on the horizon. Every time I checked the news or glanced at my emails, I felt that creeping sense of unease. And then it happened. A familiar name appeared in my inbox. It was from a lawyer representing Paul Weston. I stared at the email, disbelief washing over me. The subject line read, "Settlement offer regarding ongoing lawsuit." I clicked open the email, and what I read next shook me to my core. Paul was suing me again. This time it wasn't for defamation or sabotage. It was for misappropriation of intellectual property, the very AI he had stolen from me in the first place. The audacity. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But mostly I wanted to throw my phone across the room. How was it possible that after everything, Paul was still trying to claim my work as his own? Didn't he understand that the world knew the truth? That he was the one who had stolen from me? The lawyer's letter was filled with legal jargon, offering a settlement for an undisclosed sum, along with the condition that I give up all claims to the AI. My heart raced. This wasn't just a fight for money. It was a fight for everything I had worked for, everything I had rebuilt. I had to make a choice. I could ignore the letter, continue with my life, and risk Paul dragging me back into a long and drawn-out legal battle. Or I could fight. Not just for my company, but for everything I had ever believed in. I called Maya. I didn't wait. I needed her insight, her perspective. She had been by my side through all of this, and I trusted her judgment. I got the letter, I said, my voice tight with anger. "He's suing me again. For the AI. Leora," Maya said softly, her voice laced with concern. "This isn't over. Paul isn't going to stop until he's gotten what he wants. And now it looks like he wants everything you've worked for." I could feel the tension in her words, but I wasn't afraid. I had come this far. I had fought my battles. And I had won. But this was different. This wasn't just a fight for revenge. It was a fight for my legacy. "I'm not going to back down," I said, my voice steady. "He's going to see that I'm not the same person he knew. I've built something that's mine, and I'll fight for it with everything I've got." The next few days were filled with strategy meetings, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. I had to gather every piece of evidence I had: emails, documents, contracts, anything that would prove that I was the rightful owner of the AI and that Paul had no claim to it. But it wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. This was my chance to finally finish what we started. It was time to expose Paul for good, to take away his ability to manipulate the system, and to show the world that his power had limits. I decided to go public. If Paul was going to make this a public fight, then I would too. I would use the very platform I had created to share the truth with the world, everything he had done to steal from me, to destroy me, to ruin others. The media backlash against Paul was immediate. Articles began to surface exposing his legal battles, his manipulations, and his desperate attempts to reclaim what was never his. My supporters came out in full force, rallying behind me. It felt like the final chapter was being written. Finally, I was going to put an end to this once and for all. But as the battle raged on, I realized something: I didn't need Paul's downfall to validate me anymore. I had already won. The truth was out. The world saw who he was. And no lawsuit, no amount of money could ever change that. The final blow came when Paul's lawyer withdrew the case, citing insufficient evidence to support the claims. It was over. The weight that had been hanging over me for so long had lifted. As I stood there reading the email confirming the withdrawal, I felt free. Free from the past. Free from the anger. Free from the need to prove myself anymore. It was over, and I had won. But this victory wasn't just about destroying Paul. It was about reclaiming my life, my work, and my future. It was about learning that in the end, the power lies not in revenge, but in knowing when to let go. And as I sat back in my chair looking out over the city once again, I realized that the legacy I was leaving wasn't defined by the battles I fought, but by the life I was now able to build. The journey was over. But the story, it was just beginning. It's strange looking back. I never thought I'd find peace in the aftermath of everything that happened with Paul. For so long, all I could focus on was the fight, the need for justice, for recognition, for reclaiming what was mine. I thought that once I had won, once I had exposed him for what he really was, that everything would fall into place. But now I realized that the victory wasn't in defeating Paul. It wasn't in taking down the man who had stolen from me and tried to destroy me. It was in what I built afterward. The truth is, my true legacy wasn't defined by the battles I fought or the business I built. It was shaped by the people I helped, the lives I touched, and the change I inspired. When I first set out on this journey, I didn't know that. I didn't know that my greatest accomplishment would be something far bigger than revenge. I've built more than a company. I've built a movement. The platform I started for young innovators has taken on a life of its own. It's now a thriving hub for people with ideas who otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to make them a reality. I've met countless talented individuals, people who remind me of the way I was when I first started. Hungry, ambitious, full of passion, but without the resources or support. And as I look back at all the lives this platform has changed, I realize that it was never just about me. It was about creating something that would outlast my own success. Something that would make a difference long after I'm gone. Maya and I often talk about the future, how far we've come, how much more we want to accomplish. But now we talk about it with a sense of purpose that goes beyond business. We talk about the people we're lifting up, the ones who were overlooked, the ones who, like me, had to fight to be seen. There's a lot of pressure in being the face of a successful company, of a thriving platform. But there's a deeper, more fulfilling kind of pressure that comes from knowing that I'm giving others the chance to succeed on their own terms. It's the kind of fulfillment that I never imagined would come from this journey. As the years go by, the platform continues to grow. We've expanded to new markets, reached new demographics, and most importantly, helped create a new wave of entrepreneurs who are making a real difference in the world. I watch them build, fail, and rebuild again, And every time they succeed, I'm reminded of why I started this journey. But there's more. As I reflect on all that has happened, I can't ignore one undeniable truth. While I fought hard for what was mine, I also gained something in the process that I didn't expect: a deep sense of understanding about the fragility of success. Success isn't permanent. It's fleeting. What really matters is what you do with it. The impact you have, the lives you touch, the way you choose to use the resources and power you gain. I learned that the hard way. I remember when I first got involved with Paul, how I thought that success meant making it to the top, becoming untouchable. But I was wrong. Success is about what you give back. It's about using your knowledge, your abilities, and your position to make a difference. I often think about how far I've come since those early days: the woman who was betrayed, the woman who was shattered by the loss of something she'd worked so hard to create. I think about the woman who plotted revenge, and the woman who finally realized that revenge wasn't the answer. Revenge doesn't fill the emptiness. It doesn't heal the wounds. It doesn't give you peace. But forgiveness does. Acceptance does. Creating a future that's not shaped by the past, that's what gives you real power. I'm not the same person I was when I first started this journey. I'm stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And I'm finally at peace. Looking forward, I have a vision for the future. It's not about winning anymore. It's about building, about creating something that leaves a lasting impact on the world. I want to help the next generation of thinkers and innovators to create, not just for profit, but for purpose. To build for something greater than themselves. Because that's what matters. Not what you take, but what you give. I think of Paul every now and then. I wonder if he ever looks back at what he tried to do to me. I wonder if he ever feels the weight of the choices he made, the damage he caused. I wonder if he's ever realized that the power he sought through manipulation and greed was never true power. That true power comes from building something that lasts, something that benefits others. Maybe he'll never understand that. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all. The world doesn't remember those who seek to tear others down. It remembers those who rise above. And as I stand here watching the future unfold, I know that I am part of something bigger than myself. I am leaving a legacy, one that will outlast me.